I am originally from Wisconsin and moved to the Valley at the end of 2004 because I wanted to not only escape harsh Wisconsin winters, but also utilize my degree in a fruitful job market. Being brand new to this area of the country, I basically started from the ground up when it came to learning about the region, climate, culture, and even the local codes and laws. To state the obvious, the Phoenix area is hot, especially during the months of June through September. Mother Nature also sneaks in a bunch of hot days as early as February and as late as November as well. I will say though, that after a lifetime of cold, dark, and gray winters in Wisconsin, year-round summer was a welcome change, and for the first 7 years, I didn't mind the heat. In February of 2008, I was finally able to purchase my first home and found one that served my needs in North Glendale. Great quiet neighborhood, great schools, and a great zip code. The other bonus point to buying a house in this neighborhood was the fact that there was no HOA to worry about. I still find them to be overbearing and extremely overrated, but that's my anti-utopian me talking. The property had been foreclosed on, and I ended up getting a better sale price on the property during that time. I, however, was not anticipating the housing crash of '08. I bought with very little down, which had changed a few months later, so the timing was right for me. I missed out on the benefit to buy a larger and cheaper house on my street that was selling at half the price only a few months later, but oh well, it is what it is. I've always had a lot of tinkering and handyman experience that I learned from my dad and uncles, so I was excited to get started on making this place my own. I was at Home Depot 6 times the day I moved in, even though this 1979 house was move-in ready at the time. A few interesting observations about the property. It looked like the previous owner really liked the look and feel of up north, like the Prescott, Payson, or Flagstaff areas, because it had a rustic fence around the front of the property and 4 pine trees, which I rarely see anywhere in and around the Phoenix area. The place stuck out to me on this street for sure. I personally loved it because that is going to be my imaginary someday home in the woods anywhere north of here. Anyways, the initial pieces were all there, and there wasn't any immediate need to do any major renovations up front. The pool was plaster lined with dated waterline and coping tile, had a sand filter which requires you to backwash weekly, operated on a common chlorine, chemicals, and acids for maintenance system, and there were early signs of deck wear. The cinder block fence was unfinished, and there were 2 separate areas where there was grass growing. Finally, there was a drip and sprinkler system that seemed to be working. There was a bunch of black fencing around the west end of the pool and sections on the side of the house that looked like they had been taken out from around the covered patio at some point. Other than the 40-foot pine tree that was close to the pool deck, the overall flora in the back was sparse. So, a few things for those who don't know about specifics that exist around Phoenix, and some of the basics when you have a pool. The fence serves 2 main purposes: privacy and prevention from stray animals or children that could wander into your yard and potentially drown in the pool, which is an all too common occurrence in the valley. While it makes sense to have fences surrounding the backyard, it was still an adjustment for me to get used to that. Having come from the Midwest, that kind of thing was not as common as you were able to get to know your neighbors pretty well. So back to having a house that has a pool. If you haven't heard one of these sayings before owning one, I guarantee you will think or even say one of these as an owner at least once in your lifetime. A pool is just a hole in the backyard you throw money into. The 2 best days of a pool owner's life are the day they buy the pool and the day they sell the house. I'm in the shallow end of my bank account. All of these are 100% true, like it or not, but it's still cool to have a pool. I chose to maintain my own, but you can hire a pool maintenance service if it fits your budgetary needs. If I had to do it again, I would just find friends that have a pool that don't mind me visiting. At one point in the past 18 years of owning this place, I seriously gave heavy consideration to filling the pool in completely, but inevitably decided against it so I can someday get the return on investment when I eventually choose to sell. Man, that was a lot of setup for a whole story here, but let's get into some updates I did. The first project I took on myself was painting the cinder block fence. My good Iowa and Illinois transplanted friends that lived down the street had just painted theirs and owned a paint sprayer, so it was a cheap and easy upgrade. First I primed it and then painted it, using the additional paint that my friends had chosen for their pool fence. It took a lot longer to clean out the sprayer than it was to prime and paint the fence, but I liked the initial addition of the color instead of the prison gray. For some added ambiance, I added a few staked floodlights to project off the fence using an extension cord, and also added some cheap Polynesian string lights along the pitch of the patio. In the front of the house, I removed the fencing around the yard, mainly because I found it confining for the property, a pain to pick weeds around it, and I also backed into the post on 2 separate occasions, denting my truck. The only other initial addition was adding exterior lights to the sides of my garage door, because I think I was the only one on the street not to have them. There was just 2 motion sensor floodlights over the garage and heading up to the front door, which was a little too utilitarian for my tastes. During the spring of '09, I decided to fill in the east side of the yard with gravel to replace the sickly grass that was there. When you live in this part of the country, grass can be a headache to maintain and also get expensive to water with an always scarce water supply. This gravel added also meant me cutting off the sprinkler access to that section of the yard, as it wouldn't be needed any further. In 2010, there was a bad hailstorm and I ended up getting the roof replaced with an insurance claim. That was an aptly timed circumstance when I already knew I needed to replace the shingles anyway. I didn't do much until 2011 when I decided to rip the pine tree out of the backyard. It was shedding these things that look like Cocoa Krispies into the pool, making it a mess and throwing off the pH. In addition, I had ripped out the fence on the west side of the yard and patio. I also ended up digging a hole where the backwash was emptying out and filling it with river rocks out of the front yard, so the water had somewhere to go. With the pine tree removed, the backyard became very sparse and fully exposed to the sun, as my backyard is south-facing. I ended up ordering 3 fan palms and planted them around the corners of the pool, and also wanted to have some kind of umbrella shade tree to plant on the western part of the yard. When I spoke with the nursery, I told them I wanted something that produced minimal tree mess, once again to try and keep the pool free from debris. More on that in a future episode. Also that year, I needed to drain the pool and have the plaster replaced due to cracks, chipping, and age. Typically this has to be done every 6 to 8 years and had a cost of around $4,500 with demolition and plaster replacement. As a tip to someone who is going to or may become a pool owner, get to know your local laws on draining a pool and make sure to find a drain you can access on your property when you have to drain it. As a fun added feature, I was in my mid-30s and still in a party and social mode. I thought it would be fun to add a home-built kegerator. I found an old fridge on Craigslist that would be able to hold a half barrel and a 1/6 barrel. There was a shop down the street that had all of the supplies I needed to get it set up, and all I had to do was drill some holes into the door for the taps and find a locking mechanism for the taps and door, because I was paranoid that teenagers might try to hop the fence and have a party if I wasn't home. It was fun for a little while, but kind of a pain to maintain. Plus, an extra fridge meant a bigger electric bill. I ended up selling it when I met my wife, but it was fun while it lasted. This ends part 1 of the remodeling series. Nothing really out of the ordinary to this point, I know, but I promise that what's coming is definitely worth watching and learning from.